Most sales emails are about what the seller wants and not what the buyer wants. They talk about the features of the product and not how it helps the customers. They also use strange corporate words like efficiencies, optimize, best of breed, things you would never say in your daily life. In this video, I'll be breaking down step-by-step structures for 5 different types of emails that will help you get more replies and build pipeline. The first thing you want to do when you write an email is research your buyer and find interesting observations, one about the person you're reaching out to and 2 about the company. So let's have a look at this guy, Dan Ho, who is the head of sales development at Birdie. We can see from LinkedIn that he is hiring SDRs and he has a recent post about taking his team paintballing. So that's him at a personal level. At a company level, I know this company, Birdie, sells to care homes from research as well. So now I'm going to use some of my research in the subject line, SDR paintballing. I want it to be between 1 and 3 words with the research. Now he's opened the email, you should start the message with you versus we or your product, because it's going to force you to talk about them and not about yourself. So I put Dan, fun initiative taking your SDRs paintballing. So the reason you want to put your personalization up front is threefold. The first thing is you're a stranger, you're at the bottom of the priority list of the people you're reaching out to. They've got their colleagues, they've got their clients, they're going to prioritize them. So an email from a stranger, they're going to read through it very quickly and they often won't get past the first line. The other thing I wanted to bring up is the preview text. So what the preview text is the bit after the subject line. And if you look at your email inbox, you have the subject line and a bit of text after that you see before opening it. So that preview text is important. It's like a continuation of the subject line. Finally, there's some great research by the NNG group on the F reading format. So most people, when they read an email, they read it in an F. So they read the first line, a bit of the second line, and then their attention span drops. So that first line of the email is really important. So now we want to talk about a pain point. As you're hiring new SDRs, onboarding can be challenging as the average ramp up for a SaaS SDR has increased from 3 to 4 months. I've used a couple of acronyms here. SaaS is software as a service, SDRs are sales development reps that book meetings. With acronyms, only use them if your buyer understands them. I know Dan uses this language, which is why I've used it. And I talk about pains because you want to focus on the pains you solve for your customers versus the features of your product. How do you find pains? You may be wondering. The way to find pains is to interview your customers and ask them what the pain points are. If you're not able to do that, ask your sales team, other people in your company, leaders, what are the main pain points of the customers we work with? So now we've got our observation at the start, our pain point. Now we want a call to action, which is going to incentivize your buyers to reply. So my call to action here is interested in a playbook template that can help your SDRs get in front of more care homes. So this is what we call the content giveaway, and it incorporates the rule of reciprocity, because most salespeople will say, do you have 15 minutes for a meeting? And most people don't have that time, especially for a stranger. And as salespeople, we're always trying to take their money most obviously, but we're also trying to take their time. And people can be interested in an infinite amount of things, but they only have a finite amount of time in a week. So it's much better to use an interest call to action versus using do you have 15 minutes? And Gong did a study on this where they analyzed 500,000 emails and they found that you got twice as many replies by asking for interest as asking for time. I talked about the rule of reciprocity here, which is essentially what can you give to your buyers? So before trying to sell your product, think what valuable content do you have that you can offer them to get a reply? So in this case, I've offered a playbook template because I know that that can help him with onboarding his new SDRs, the new salespeople that he's hiring. So I know this is a piece of content that's valuable for him. Now you see here that we don't use a link to a content or an attachment because for 2 reasons. One is if we put a link that can sometimes get you sent to spam because email security may see that as a threat for phishing. And the other thing is by asking for interest, he's got to reply yes. And that means we can start a conversation with him. A little trick here as well is that sometimes their phone number, their cell phone, mobile phone is in the signature. So if they reply yes, you can actually have a conversation with them, send them the template and then call them up and have a conversation. In my case, how are you training your SDRs? In your case, think about those what or how questions you can ask on calls. We'll cover calls in a different session. So I'm just going to go back to focusing on emails today. Now, the final note on this email is you'll notice it's very short. Some people are shocked by how short our emails are. You generally want them under 100 words or ideally under 70 words. Going back to what I said earlier, you're a stranger, this is a cold email, you don't have much time to get their attention. The other thing is you don't want big blocks of text. 60 to 70% of emails are read on mobile or cell phones. Now, what I want you to do is press pause here, look at the template that we have, and then I want you to have a look at the example that I gave you, and I want you to create your own email. If you're struggling to find observations, pain points, content to give away, have a talk with your team, your sales team, your marketing team, and they'll be able to help you out. Okay, now I've got bad news for you. Most strangers will not reply after the first email. They're out of office, they're at an event, they're traveling, they're on holiday. Or often they're busy with colleagues, internal matters. So just because someone doesn't reply, it doesn't mean there's no interest, and you should follow up. So what do? We send what we call a bump email. Now this should be a reply to your original email. It shouldn't be a new email. And the goal is just to give more attention to that original email. So here is an example of a bump message I would send to Dan. Subject line is the same, it's just so re SDR paintballing, replying to the original thread. Dan, interested in that playbook template for your new hires. So the reason this is only one line is so your prospects can see the original email. You put a lot of effort into it and often they won't see it, so you're just trying to attract more attention to it. Send the email to your mobile phone as a test to see how it looks. You'll also see there why we want it on one line, because when you look at it at the email, you don't want to have to scroll down to see the original email. And sales is all about balancing quality and quantity. So this is what we're doing here with the bump email. It may take you 10, 15 minutes to personalize that first email, whereas this is a quick bump that we can automate, we'll send to a lot of people that can help us hit our numbers as well. So and this is why our email sequences combine automation and personalization to help you hit quality and quantity. So here is the format to use. You can see the template on one side, and then you're going to be able to see this example I just gave you on the other side. This is going to be one of the easier emails you write, the bump email. So far we have two emails. We have the first one, giving away a piece of content, personalization to your buyer, Dan in my case, and then one bumping it. Now I'm going to help you create two more emails in your sequence. And as I said, a lot of people aren't going to reply to your first email, but even your second email, right? Just because they haven't replied to two emails doesn't mean they're not interested. People are often just busy. And the thing to look out for in your sequence is the individual reply rate and the sequence reply rate. So here on screen, you can see some stats from my colleague, Lawrence Jackman. Overall, he got a reply rate of 20%, which is really impressive across 8 emails because that's total strangers. So 1 in 5 strangers responded. But if you look at the individual reply rate per email, it's not as impressive. 3.4% on email 1, 2.7% email 2. You keep going down, a lot of 3s, a lot of 2s. Interestingly, the last email, email 8, got a 5.3% response. We'll talk about that later. But gradually these numbers add up and you get to a 20% reply rate. So that's why you keep going. You don't necessarily need 8 emails, could be 4, 5, 6, but the more you are persistent, the higher your reply rate is going to be. So let's add 3 more templates here. So the first email we did was offering a piece of content. Now we're going to talk more about our product or service, but we're not going to do this through features. We're going to do this by talking about a customer story of how we helped a customer and the problems they solve. For consistency, we're going to stick with the same guy, Dan Ho. The subject line I'm going to use here is paintball promotions. I'll talk about promotions later, but I mentioned paintball related to the research earlier. So again, with your buyers, you only need to research once. You don't need to research every time you contact them. Use the research you've done before, but this time we're just going to use the research in a different type of way. Now, the body of the email is going to have the same structure as the first email that we sent out. It's going to have different pain points, and also it's going to talk about a customer story instead. So first line here is, Dan, after your new SDRs start to target care homes, they will face a lot of rejection, and on average, 36% don't last a year. So I've talked around his new SDRs, the new hires, and the fact they sell to care homes, that research from before. And then I've mentioned different types of pain points here, the rejection that SDRs face, the fact that they may not last a year. And now we come into the customer story. So how has another customer helped solve that pain? Inbox Health, another healthcare SaaS, reduced SDR attrition, had 3 of their SDRs promoted and a 61% increase in pipeline, thanks to Growth Genie's sales playbooks and training. So notice here, the customer is the hero of this story. Not me, not Growth Genie. We want to make the customer the hero of the story. What we do, playbooks and coaching and training, I only mentioned at the end of it. So in your customer stories, you want to make the customer the hero. You don't want to make your product the hero. And the reason the customer story is important is people are looking for social proof. Later on, they're going to ask you what similar customers have you worked with. So this helps you identify that. So I wanted to talk around here, material versus spiritual pains, which goes into our framework, Cosmic. So you can see we talk about a bit of a spiritual thing here, which is the SDRs getting rejected and having a tough job, and also the fact that there's high attrition rate, which is related to the spiritual pain of your sales team leaving you and that you haven't done a good job as a manager. But then there's also the statistical 36% more of that material. And then also the results we got, the 61% increase in pipeline. So you want to try and connect with your buyers on an emotional level, the way the SDRs feel rejected, or they're doing a tough job, they leave the company, which affects you as a manager. And then also at a material level, right? The statistics, the increase in pipeline in this case. Now I wanted to come on to the call to action. So what I put here is opposed to learning more. And again, you'll see with this call to action, I'm trying to get them to say yes or no. It's what we say is a low friction call to action. On an email and a call, your calls to actions are different. It's easier to ask an open-ended question on a call. How are you doing that? On an email, it creates a lot of work. They've got to type a long answer. So what you want on emails is a low friction call to action where people can just answer yes or no, and opposed to learning more does that. So they can either say, yes, I am interested, or no, this is not a good fit for me. It makes it very easy for them to reply. Some alternatives you could use here are interested in learning more, open to learning more. But remember, you do not want to ask for time. Don't say, do you have 15 minutes? Do you have 30 minutes? And you don't want an open-ended call to action. That's better on a call, which is interactive. Here, you just want to ask if they're interested and they can say yes or no. It's easy for them to respond. Okay, so we've got the full email now, right? Here you can see the example that I just went through and how you can use a template of this customer story email. So again, what I'd like you to do to help you write this email, get the most appropriate customer story to the customers that you are targeting. If you're not sure what the most appropriate customer story is, ask your manager, ask your sales team. You can also ask marketing, because marketing are often in charge of writing customer stories, or you can ask customer success or customer service as they're speaking to your customers all day. Okay, so we're now going to write another bump to this customer story email. Again, because it's a bump, we just reply to the original email. We put re-paintball promotions. And again, it's one line. Dan, interested in learning how Inbox Health reduced SDR attrition. Same thing here. We just want it on one line. It's a reply to your original email. And the only goal is to give more attention to that customer story email. You may notice here, I didn't put an increased pipeline to make it longer because there was a couple of benefits in the last email. I just focused on that reduced SDR attrition. And that is because I want it to stay on one line. That's why I've used it that way. And the reason we don't want it across 2 lines is if it's across 2 lines, they may not see your original email. As I said, if you look at it on your phone, they may have to scroll down. You want to make it as easy as possible to see that original email. So here you have the template. Here you have the example I've got. So go ahead and write a bump to your customer story email. So finally, we have a last touch email. Even if you're a very persistent salesperson, you send 8, 10, 12 emails. Yes, I do know persistent people that send 12 emails and sometimes they get responses on the 12th email. But even people like that eventually have to do a last touch email. And I never say they give up, right? Because often it's not the right timing for a buyer, which is why they don't respond. So you may contact them again in 2 months. That's why I never like this term breakup email, which a lot of salespeople use to describe their last email. How can you break up with someone if you were never together in the first place? How can you get divorced from someone if you weren't even married? So what we do at Growth Genie is instead of a breakup email, we use a feedback email. Now, us salespeople have a very bad reputation. We're seen as people that will sell ourselves to the devil, that are commission hungry, and this is turning it on its head. This is us becoming more humble as salespeople and acknowledging the buyer is in a position of power. They're the ones that decide if they make a purchase or not, and we're acknowledging that and asking for their feedback. So this is how that email looks. The subject line, just one word, may say feedback. The only goal of a subject line is to create curiosity. I'm just saying, hey Dan, do you mind providing some feedback on my emails? It will help me improve and save other sales leaders from my mediocre messaging. Bit of humor there at the end with the mediocre messaging. And this flips this reputation of salespeople, as I said, by coming from a place of humility. And psychologically, most people like to be helpful. It makes them feel good. And in this case, they're not just helping you, the seller, they're also helping others in their position, because you said it will help other people in your position and help save them from my mediocre messaging. Do you want to know a really mad thing? Remember that customer story I told you about earlier, Inbox Health? Well, we actually won that customer from a feedback in, and this was it. You can see here. Feedback from Mike was a subject line. Mike, I'm always looking to improve when speaking to other sales leaders, so have a quick favor to ask. Do you mind sharing some feedback about my email outreach? Now you'll notice here, we slightly changed this email. I sent this email 18 months ago, so we're always evolving, and we made some tweaks to it, like the line at the end around mediocre messaging and the subject line. But the premise of the email is the same. We're asking for feedback, right? And it still worked. In this case, here is what Mike responded. Michael, I obsess with outreach sequence and content with my team, so happy to discuss. And then this is the funny bit where he says, P.S. I guess this email proves the please help approach can work. Now, not only did Inbox Health become a customer of ours from this email, but Mike Sheridan, who was their chief revenue officer at the time, he became a friend of mine and a mentor, as he's a guy that has managed thousands of salespeople. So I was really happy I managed to get his attention, and I asked him to be a mentor for my company. So by asking for feedback, you can really make magic happen. So here is the template you can use. As you'll see the example that I did with Mike, and then you'll see the template. All you need to do for this one is change the job title. So it's a really easy template to use. Talking of feedback, if you have any feedback for me on this video, I'm open to it. So leave it in the comments, and hope this has been useful.